Hi, I'm Bailey, and this is my classmate Julia. Today we are here to talk about one thing and one thing only: domestic violence. You may be wondering what that is. Many people have their own definition for violence. Violence is the act of physically or verbally intended harm to someone or something. Domestic violence, however, is typically found within the household, with the suspect being someone the victim knows and loves. We came together to determine what this talk will be about, and we became inspired by this woman named Leslie Morgan Steiner. This inspiring woman had found herself in a case of domestic violence with her first long relationship with her boyfriend and future husband. She stated that at one point she had a loaded gun pointed to her head. Not only that, but there were many other instances when her husband would get upset or angry and then bring out his anger on her and physically beat her. With Steiner's stories and our opinions, we concluded that individuals in abusive relationships are from all different races, social classes, and educational levels. Domestic abuse is widespread, and it happens to even those who don't seem to fit the type.
In Leslie's situation, the man in the relationship was the abuser, which supports the statistic stating that 85% of domestic abuse cases involve a male abuser. Though Leslie managed to safely get out of her relationship with the man who beat her, not as many women are so lucky. With as many as 500 women and girls being murdered in their early 20s every year by an abusive partner just in the U.S., there's a huge stigma about speaking of domestic abuse and a common misunderstanding among society against the victims in these situations. The belief that these women have themselves to blame for the abuse and not leaving is wrong, as there is a great risk posed to them if they attempt to leave, involving stalking and even death. 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence or stalking at some point in their life. The person you're sitting next to could be a victim in the past or the future.
From what researchers and investigators have found out, the first step to a domestic violence relationship is to seduce and charm the victim. In Leslie's case, her abuser was able to seduce her into a loving few years together before they continued to the next step. Within those 2 years, there was never any other sign of an abusive relationship. One day they were engaged, and another day Leslie was being beaten just 5 days before their marriage. The next step of a domestic violence relationship is to isolate the victim. After they got married, her husband quit his job and asked Leslie to quit hers as well so they can move and live in a home together. In this home, he wanted to make sure that no one could hear her cries or screams as she would call out in pain as she was being abused. So this, quote, perfect home they found was mostly perfect for the suspect to abuse his wife. The third step is to introduce and perform abusive behavior. Leslie stated that at one time they were in a car together on their honeymoon, and her husband was driving and another car swerved close to their car, almost hitting them. She said that instantly triggered her husband and ticked him off so much that he ended up throwing a partially eaten burger at her face. One thing you could have told Leslie is that he doesn't fit the personality, but in fact he did. No one notices these characteristics of a domestic violence abuser until the victim has spoken up about it or someone catches the act. The final step of a domestic violence relationship is to kill the victim. If the victim did not end off their relationship, they are either still in it because they are afraid or because they were murdered by the abuser. This supports the fact that over 70% of domestic violence murders happen after the victim has ended the relationship.
Every year, 15 million adolescent abuse cases are reported, and these are only the ones that have been exposed. Often in domestic violence cases, since the abuser is a person that the victim is close with, they will feel as though the abuse they are suffering is their fault, or that the violence isn't abuse but a form of love. Abusers will often say things to their victims such as, "If you didn't do that, this wouldn't happen," or "This wouldn't be happening if you had listened." Society has formed this notion that the victim is to blame for the continued trauma that they go through with their abuser, and that they allow it to continue by staying in the relationship or staying in contact with the abusive partner or acquaintance. The reality of the situation is that there's a huge threat posed to individuals in these situations when they try to leave, from manipulation and stalking to death. which is the biggest and most concerning of the problems. Abusers may try to keep a victim from leaving them by saying that they need them, but they don't ever want to do it again, and even crying and threatening to kill themselves. As many abusers are often mentally unstable, this makes leaving close to impossible for many victims, as these are people they love, and they feel responsible for the aggression and anger cast upon them. Long-term stalking is also a problem with many victims that attempt to leave an abusive partner. Because of this, victims can struggle to move on with their lives and are in constant fear, often having to take abusers to court and get restraining orders. The most problematic and terrifying of the problems that victims go through is often because of the mental instability of the abuser. Leaving can cost a domestic violence victim their life. Abusers become obsessive and crave the ability to control the victim. And when the victim tries to leave, they are risking their life. As I previously said, 500 women and girls in their early 20s die from domestic violence every year, proving that there are extreme consequences to leaving an abusive relationship.
On average, nearly 20 people per minute are being physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. Overall, domestic violence affects all genders, races, and cultures, leaving no person completely safe from the dangers of it. Abuse can affect your daughter, sister, brother, or best friend right now. Domestic violence begins with the abuser seducing the victim, followed by isolating them, then introducing them to the threat of violence, and in extreme cases, the final act of the abuser killing the victim. The abuser will make their victim feel like they have done something wrong to deserve the violence and wrongdoings of a mentally unstable partner, friend, or family member. In domestic violence cases, no one is discriminated, and the society must learn to speak out and help protect people by ending their stigma, talking about abuse, and staying silent. Staying silent in a situation of a domestic violence relationship only thrives the abuser to continue to do it. To decrease occurrences of domestic abuse, talk about it with friends, family, and coworkers. Recognize the early stages of violence and intervene appropriately, and show the victims that there is a safe way to stay out of the relationship. Thank you.